Afternoon, guys, girls. I'm just going to do a story today about Highdown. I think I've told you before, Highdown. When I was in Highdown, it was a maximum security prison for Category A prisoners and B category prisoners. Although apparently one of my subscribers has told me they have built a C category bit there now. But I want to do a little story about when I was there in the early 1990s with I was on the same spur as a few of the ACAT guys, obviously A category prisoners would be in a single cell. Pretty sure I was in a single cell, and was B category at the time. And the story, it's about I'm going to call it Pass the Parcel, guys. After that party game, Pass the Parcel. Because what it's about is the three ACATs that were in the cell on the threes, because you got the ones, twos and threes on each spur. And opposite me, the three top cells, the three single cells on the top landing on the threes were reserved for A category prisoners and potential ACAT prisoners. Potential ACAT just means that they are on the book. You call it the book because the screws walk around with a little blue book and write every move they make in it and that. So potential just means they're borderline. They could be higher security risk and therefore they're being watched that little bit more, and any information coming in or they do anything iffy, then maybe they go on the book, that sort of stuff, so basically under observation all the time. But one of these guys, Dean McGillicuddy, he was doing 14 years and he was a friend of mine in there, and he was friendly with the other two guys obviously, and he was doing 14 years for supplying ecstasy, and this guy sort of knew him from the outside. He had a sports shop down by the Eagle Star building at the bottom of Sutton there. He had a Sutton Sports for a while, and when he got caught, all he was actually caught with was 70 grand in cash, 70,000 in cash and one ecstasy tablet. So guys, he got 14 years imprisonment for one ecstasy tablet. All the evidence apparently was circumstantial. So Dean, he was a bit of a face, and he was selling a bit of brown in there, to help with the money, I suppose. 14 years is a long sentence, and people like their little luxuries, and obviously he wanted to keep the money coming in because it's a long time. 14 years, the earliest you can get out on that would have been 8 years. He would have had to have done 8 years out of that for his EDR, his earliest date for release. Sorry guys, I am smoking tobacco at the moment. I have been trying to stop. I have cut down, but when I finish this packet of tobacco, I'm going to stop altogether and maybe just do a little bit of vaping, because it is pretty bad for you to smoking. And my dad, he smoked all his life, and he's got COPD and lots of other illnesses due to smoking and stuff. So be best to the best thing is to not do it at all. Back to the story. So what I was going to say is, like this guy Dean, he was selling the brown in there, and I remember one time he's given me a job, asking me if I can go and give someone a slap over some beef they had, whether on the out or in there. It could have just been that he owed him some money, and basically he was offering me a £20 bag for that, and I'll do that story another time anyway about that. But this one is about the time, when Dean used to get a visit, he'd have his parcel round him all the time. If you wanted to go and buy a £10 bag or a £20 bag or a gram off him, you could do that, or even an eighth. He'd have at least a minimum of a quarter ounce of heroin on him all the time, maybe more, maybe half ounce. And I know this because my friend used to go out and get the gear for him on his visits. A friend of mine, little Sid, who was on remand, used to go and get it for him, because someone like Dean, that he wouldn't have put himself at risk by bringing in drugs to the prison himself. So what he used to do, when he used to get a visit, because obviously he'd not want to take his parcel of gear out to the visiting room with him and then get searched again and blah, 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 you know, so he'd leave it with the next person. So this time, the next person that he used to leave the parcel with was his friend Tony Pendry, who was a nice guy. He was on remand at the time for that Kidbrooke job, an armed robbery. I think it was something to do with the Arifs back then, and they had mini Uzi submachine guns, and they fired at the old Bill and all that. So yeah, he was about 6'6", this guy, Tony Pendry, nice guy. He had been studying architecture, and then he decided to get involved in armed robbery and stuff. So I never found out what he got for that or whether he was convicted. But yeah. So basically, this day, when Dean's been called out for a visit, he can't leave the parcel with his neighbour Tony Pendry because he's been called out for a legal visit at the same time, which he didn't know because they used to have all this sorted out between themselves, you know, so he couldn't leave it with the next guy, Tony. So after that, there was one other guy that he used to leave his parcel with, and this guy used to sell bags for Dean as well. His name was Rory, this northern guy. Rory, he was doing a 7, I think. And so the funny thing was, Rory had been taken to a visit as well. So basically, all 3 of these guys are on visit. So who's he going to leave his parcel with? There's only one person he can think of, and that's Sid, little Sid Hussein, who is a drug user as well. You know, he's one of the cleaners. He goes and gets the parcel for Dean on the visits, you know, and brings it in for him. And then he, you know, when he goes and gets the parcel, Dean watches him take it out, and then he hands it over to him, you know, so he doesn't get left with it on his own. You know, he wouldn't be in a position to dip the parcel out on his visit and all that sort of stuff, you know. So what he does, when he does a visit for Dean, he takes the parcel out, the 1/4 ounce of heroin, and then hands it straight over to Dean, and then Dean pays him something for bringing that in. You know, it wasn't a lot. I think he was telling me he was getting about half a gram, you know, a gram maybe for bringing that in, but I'm not so sure it was even that much. So the reason why all this paranoia, obviously it's worth thousands of pounds in there, this amount of gear, 7 grams of gear, you know, you can imagine that's a few grams worth in there, you know. You're talking about a gram is a minimum of 30 bags, you know, and times that by 7, you know, that's 200 bags, you know, that's a couple of grand easy, let's just say that. So yeah, so Dean's got his visit, and he can't leave it with anyone that he 100% trusts. The people he usually leave it with sell it for him, or they don't take it and they're very trustworthy. He doesn't want to leave it, the parcel, with someone who uses gear. Plus, what it is with Sid, he knows if he leaves it with Sid, there's a chance someone else is going to find out and you know, try and rob Sid of the parcel. But what actually happened, he's left this parcel with Sid, and I've got unlocked, especially one of the screws. Everyone's supposed to be banged up apart from the cleaners, which is Sid is one of the cleaners, and John McQuaid. He sort of does bits of work for Dean, you know, any hits and all that. And this guy, John McQuaid, he was doing 5 years or 6 years anyway, but he was at Highdown. He'd come from Coldingley, because there'd been an altercation with another inmate in Coldingley, and John McQuaid had done the other inmate with, you know, the plastic tea jugs that you get, you know, he smashed him in the face with that quite a few times, and he was at outside court for this assault of this guy. I'm not sure what it was over, probably drugs, but I can't really remember. But I did see the photos of the victim, and that was very bad looking. You know, his whole face was just covered in stitches and scars. It's like lines up and down everywhere of stitching, where basically McQuaid had took this guy's face off, you know, with a plastic drinking jug. So some force involved there. So yeah, he was outside court, and because he was at outside court, he'd been sent to Highdown maximum security from the B category Coldingley, which is in another part of Surrey, Coldingley. Industrial Nick. So yeah, basically McQuaid's out. He's found out, because he's out and he's listening to everything, that Sid's got the parcel off of Dean, and he's looking after it. I mean, Sid didn't go and declare this to him. McQuaid just overheard it, and you know what he done? He come and got me unlocked. So basically, he got Sid and said, "Come here up on a freeze. I want a word with you." Got Sid to go into the bathroom, and he said, "Right, get it out." Basically, Sid didn't mind doing it. He wasn't getting robbed. He was getting it out, basically. If it had come on top for Sid, then he's hoping McQuaid will back him up. But I know for a fact, if it had come on top, Dean wouldn't have said anything to John McQuaid, because he was a complete and utter lunatic. Even the Screws were scared of John McQuaid. He used to live, his local nick was Pentonville. He used to live opposite, and I knew his son as well, Fenton Fowler. He was banged up with his own son for a while in there. So yeah, we're at the showers on the freeze by the, you know, the recess by the cells where these three guys usually are, but they're all out on visits. So basically, I'm watching outside, and I've got the door open to the showers to make sure there's no screws coming up. So basically, he's telling him to get it out. Sid's got the parcel out, and it's in a Durex, a condom, you know, and inside that is 7 grams of heroin, you know, really good quality heroin. So basically, he's got a bit of paper out for him and said, right, take some of that out of there. So he's got a bit of card, and he's taking an amount out of the main parcel and putting it into a wrap of paper for John. And also I'm getting a little wrap of paper for myself. So out of that 7 grams, I think we must have had at least over a gram each. I mean, I had half a gram out of it, and God knows how much they had. So, you know, but nothing was said. So I'd say probably out of the 7 grams, we probably had about a gram out of it, you know. And then he tied the knot up the same and gave it back to Dean, you know, handed it back when he came off the visit. And whether he knew or not, I don't know. But I don't think he did, you know. You know, as he wasn't a drug user, he was purely for the financial reasons, you know. And eventually Dean, he got allocated. He got a C category actually, because he did pay off one of the allocation officers, the Screws. You know, you could you could bribe them then, you know, offer them 500 quid to get the allocation of your choice. That used to happen a lot with the bigger villains, you know. So he got allocated there, and he wanted John McQuaid to actually go with him, you know, because he was sort of becoming his right hand man, you know, when he was doing his heroin selling business. McQuaid was the muscle, you know, in there. And this guy John McQuaid, he was a Scottish guy, old villain from Glasgow, and you know, he looked pretty fucking mean. You know, if you can't usually go by how people looked. But if you see this guy, you look at him, and he was an old geezer and all, you know, back then in the 90s, when I was just 21, 22, he would have been about 50. But I remember him, when I used to come off visits, you know, he was always there waiting for me, and I'd sort him out. But I've got a few stories about him and those times, yeah. So yeah, just a random little story there about my time, some time with the ACATs there in Highdown back in the 90s, guys. And yeah, what is it, Friday afternoon, I'm just going to watch Danny Christie and Matt Legg this afternoon, or early this evening. He's doing a live, them two. That was a good fight, weren't it? The Danny Christie fight, the BKFC fight. So yeah, I'll be watching that later. And I just want to say, you know, thanks again to everyone that's been watching, and really appreciate all the comments that people are doing, that take the time to reply to me and all that sort of stuff, you know. And just want to say, guys, have a good weekend, and try and upload something as soon as possible, guys. And thanks a lot. Cheers.